We've been walking through the book of James for a couple months now, and we're towards the end. We have a couple more weeks before we get to kind of Christmas time. But if you've noticed, there's a theme and a thread through James where he's like incessantly focused on relationships, on the way we interact with people. It almost seems like he gives more examples of our faith fleshing out relationally, horizontally to each other than he does vertically towards God. Like he's talked through, don't show partiality. Here's how to do true, actually have pure religion, is care for orphans and widows. And here's how to tame the tongue and all these types of things. And there's all this relational expression between them. Why? Why is he so focused on that? Because the way we treat people is a great indicator of the way we believe God treats us, or the way we believe, or we would treat God. Like in some regard, those are interconnected. And so this morning, James doesn't let off that reality of pressing into our relationships, but he looks upward vertically towards us and God in a really beautiful way, and it contains one of my favorite verses in the Bible. So that's where we're going to go this morning, look through that. But he starts off in this chapter, and by asking, what's the root of all our relationships? We can all admit we're not killing it with our relationships. There's drama, there's conflict, there's all this stuff going on. And James goes, what's the root behind all of that? What's going on underneath all of that? Why do we keep hurting each other? What's the reason we've got conflict and strife? And normally if you ask somebody and go, hey, what's causing, all this stuff, what's causing the drama in your life? Our normal response is, well, oh man, I'll tell you what, my boss is a jerk. He's just not easy to get along with. Or, man, my spouse is they've been nagging me, or they've been distant, or my friends are hard to get along with, or my kids are crazy, or whatever. And we often blame shift our relational drama on other people and who they are. And yet James doesn't let us do that. He hones in on us. And so what's the answer to why we've got this relational conflict among ourselves? James says, is because we've got internal conflict. There's a battle going on between us because there's a battle going on inside of us. So look at James 4, verse 1, jumping in. He says, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? What's the root of all that? He says, is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? This is crazy important to understand. Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? So in other words, you're at war with others because you're at war with yourself. There's a war within you. So the word passion there is the Greek word hedon, which is where we get the English word hedonism. Now, if you don't know what hedonism means, don't worry, I didn't either until maybe a couple of years ago, and started learning it. Wow, that's really significant to understand. Hedonism, simply put, is the belief that the ultimate pursuit of our life is our happiness. Okay, we live in an extremely hedonistic culture. Everything is filtered to this idea. Every decision we make, the main causing driving factor we're asking is, will it make me happy? All of culture. And honestly, Christians aren't exempt from that. There's this innate realityness that we're hedonistic. We just want to do what we think will make us happy. And that's what that word is, hedon, passions, that your hedonism is at war within you. And so the driving factor of who we marry, when we have kids, what kind of job we have, what kind of neighborhood we live in, is all filtered through how will this make me happy or how will it not. Belief that decisions we make will make us more happy. And James is saying that's the war that's within us. Okay, so that's the passions are at war. Hedonism, a selfish kind of worldly pursuit of my happiness is the ultimate goal. Well, what's it at war with? That's the bad guy. What's the good guy? John Piper has coined the phrase Christian hedonism. And so hedonism is this reality of my happiness is my ultimate goal. Christian hedonism would go, my ultimate joy is only found in God. And in that sense, I can have as much as I want, right? And so the phrase that is attached with Christian hedonism is that God is most glorified in us when we're most satisfied in him. So that connection to understand, those two things are battling. Hedonism, I'm trying to make myself happy. This world make me happy. Christian hedonism, actually, this desire that I'm having is a good desire. C.S. Lewis goes, your desires aren't too strong. They're actually too weak. You're settling for a day at the, or in the mud puddles or whatever when you have a day at the beach offered. So he's going, Christian hedonism is looking at, man, God's actually the ultimate definitive source of joy. So Psalm 16:11, David goes, in your presence is the fullness of joy. John 10:10, Jesus says, I've come to bring life and bring it abundantly. And so as Christians, our deepest desire to be happy, that hedonistic impulse, has shifted from thinking this world will make us happy to believing confidently that God will be our satisfaction. He's definitively that source. So hear me say this. You have to hear me. God is not a killjoy. Contrary to popular belief and opinion, God is not a killjoy. He's not on the hunt to take away all the things that bring us joy. Think about this for a second. Parents in the room, can we just think about this? How much joy, how much of your joy is attached to your kids' joy? Like, does any parent in the room just want really good rule followers, but they're just like, there's no smile, there's no joy? No. There's like something special in my heart that happens when I hear Eden belly laugh, my daughter, you know? Like, it's just like, oh, and God refers to himself over and over again as a father to us. And so that's the way he feels about you. He loves seeing you joyful. He loves seeing you full of life. He's not a killjoy. He's not trying to suppress it and take all these things away. But he does know that the only source that you're going to find that joy, the only place you're going to really, truly belly laugh at a soul level is with him. And it can't be found in any other place. And so at war within every Christian is the roller coaster journey of up and down, of being satisfied in God, seeing it, drinking from the well, and this living water that's truly satisfying, and then simultaneously going to look for that same satisfaction in the world. The battle is believing that in his presence is the fullness of joy, not a bar, not a corner office, not a bigger house, not retired on the beach in Florida, not on the altar getting married, not in a nursery with your new baby, but in his presence is the fullness of joy. Well, what does that look like? What's this at war, this hedonistic desire or this hedonistic war in us? What's it look like? He gives 3 examples in the next upcoming verses. So look at the beginning of verse 2. He says, so here's his passions at war within you. He says, you desire and don't have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and you quarrel. So the first way this plays out is the idea of coveting. And so he lays out this progression. You see something, you want it, you don't have it, so you try to get it, but you can't get it. So the idea here is that we want what other people want. Right? They seem happy with what they have, and I want to be happy like they're happy, but they have something that makes them happy, so I want that thing so I can be happy. That's the idea. And he uses the word covet here, which is just basically means wanting something you don't have. And as a reminder, the 10th commandment in the 10 Commandments is don't covet. Okay, so this is a call that we're all guilty of. But how many of you remember the Livestrong bracelets, the yellow Livestrong bracelets? You can raise your hand. Okay, how many of you had one? Could you just raise your hand if you had one? Okay, yeah. Okay, and can we just be honest? We rocked those Livestrong bracelets, okay? Like in 2004, and I'm just realizing like usually I kind of resonate with the younger crowd, but it feels like at the 8 a.m. I was like, okay, this is like not okay. Like in 2004, so not too long ago, these were like the thing. They were made and sold to raise money for to improve the lives of people affected by cancer. And this little yellow silicone bracelet raised $100 million, which, praise God, it's a great organization to give to, right? Or cause to give to. But if you remember those days, these were literally everywhere. And you did not want to be seen in public without your Livestrong bracelet. It was like a fashion statement. I don't know why, but people were so crazy about them. They were sold for $1, but there was such a shortage that people were paying crazy amounts for these Livestrong bracelets. Now, I'm not trying to be pessimistic here, but I'm just trying to ask, like, why were we so crazy about them? For a majority of people, not trying to be pessimistic, but that had a Livestrong bracelet, I don't think it was because they were super passionate about helping people with cancer. I think it was because everyone else had them and we wanted them, right? And so we want what people want. We got hundreds of toys in our house, and hundreds of them go unplayed with. And then Haddon finds this random little car, and suddenly Gracie and Eden want it more than anything, like T Swift. And I love Taylor Swift, she's amazing. But this week she breaks Ticketmaster, literally sells 2 million tickets in like a world record time. And everyone's like, oh, and there's something about that. Whoa, it's selling out. Everyone loves T Swift. I want to go there. I got to be a part of it. There's something in us that wants what other people want. That's coveting. That's again the hedonistic root. Oh, they've got it. They're happy. I keep wanting, and maybe this will make me happy. Maybe that concert will make me happy. Maybe rocking that Livestrong bracelet will make me happy. Maybe that toy will make me happy, whatever it is. And so here's why that's problematic, is because we live and we work and we play with people, with a lot of different people who have a lot of different things. And every interaction is a breeding ground for our hedonism to explode. That war within us that's happening of our passions, that's a breeding ground for it. And so we see what our friends have and we want it. We see what our coworker has and we check on Amazon. We see an influencer on social media have something, we want something. I can't tell you how many times I've opened up Amazon right when I got home from hanging out with friends because I found something I want that they had. You know, it's like, it's problematic. Kristen's like, just stay home. Don't hang out with people anymore, Austin. Like, our budget can't handle this, right? We covet. But look at this. If you look at this is like wild. He goes, you desire, don't have, so you murder, right? So and some take this like really literally. Like it's kind of picturing David and Uriah, like that type of, he wanted Bathsheba, he kills Uriah, this whole thing. But then he goes, so it's just saying there's relational conflict. We're willing to do whatever we can to get that thing. But then he says you covet, right? You want what you can't have. But then he says, and you cannot obtain, which I think is a really, really odd statement. Because think of all the things that our internal hedonism has gone, I want that. And we went, okay. And we got it. We saved up. We sold some things. We changed our whatever. And we waited, but we got the thing we coveted. Think of all the long list of things we've wanted and ended up getting. But he's saying here, you covet it, but you can't get it. What he's saying is that beneath our want is another want. There's a deeper want. He's pointing out the futility of our hedonism, the meaninglessness of it. It's not just, you don't just want this new thing or that upgraded, that, like, he pops our naive, hopeful hearts, that bubble, and goes, you can't get it. You can't get it. That's the end of every hedonistic pursuit, isn't it? We want what we want, and then we get it, and then we're still hungry for more, so we want more. That new phone, the new relationship, the new office, the new house, the new kitchen remodel, the new car, the new promotion, and it's amazing until it isn't anymore. And it kind of faded. And so you want something different. That thing your hedonistic nature wanted didn't scratch your hedonistic itch, at least for very long, and so you moved on. And this is crazy, we set our sights on something else to fulfill that, stupidly convinced that maybe this time it'll finally satisfy me for longer than a month. And so all the while, we Christians are trying to simultaneously convince ourselves that Jesus is actually better, right? Yet we give way more time and energy and money and thought and action to our hedonistic desires rather than our greatest satisfaction in him. So here's what Dr. Samuel Johnson said about this. He said, of all that have tried this selfish experiment of hedonism, let one come forth and say that he has succeeded. He that has made gold his idol, has it satisfied him? He that has toiled in the fields of ambition, has he been repaid? He that has ransacked every theater of sensual enjoyment, is he content? Can any answer in the affirmative? Not one, right? So that's the first kind of problem or expression of our hedonistic battle inside of our hearts. The second one that he focuses in on is prayer. So look at the end of verse 2 and verse 3. He says, so you covet, you desire all this. And he goes, you don't have because you don't ask. Verse 3, and you ask and don't receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. So he focused on two aspects of prayer here. Number one is prayerlessness. He says you don't ask. Now, I thought it was odd that James brings up prayer after talking about coveting and conflict. And right after he says you can't obtain, he says, well, the reason you can't obtain is because you're not praying for it. You're not asking for it. And so here's what James is pointing out. We often say to God, we kind of often say, in light of this frustration, I'm done going to God. I'm not going to him anymore. He didn't give me what I want. And so I'm going to go to the world. I'm not going to ask. I'm going to take it for myself. I'm going to go get it because he's not responding to me. I've always been intrigued by Philippians chapter 4. Paul gives this invitation. He says, let every request be known to God. Like everything, whatever is going on in your heart, whatever you're hoping for, ask God. It's a great invitation. Wow, that's sweet that I have that kind of relationship with him. And then you would think the following verse would be, and he'll give you what you asked for. Or he'll give you what would be best. But he doesn't say that. In verse 7, it says, "In the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Peace. I asked for a fiance, and peace, I asked for promotion. I asked for the offer to get accepted. I asked to get pregnant. Peace. I didn't ask for that. But here's what God's saying. I'll give you what you really need, and you don't even know what to ask for, but it's peace. The overwhelming confidence that your Father in heaven cares about you, and he loves you, and he's never taken his eye off of you. But it's easy as Christians, we know Philippians 4, whatever, but to get frustrated when it seems like God is ignoring our requests. He's just unwilling and immovable. And we just get frustrated and fed up, and then we just go, I'm done. I'm just not even going to pray to him anymore. I'm not even going to ask him anymore about this. This is the hedonistic war inside of us. I don't like what you're giving me. It's not making me happy, according to my definition of it, so I'm going to go get happiness elsewhere. I'm going to go make my own happiness and go find it. He says, you don't ask. And then he continues in verse 2, in verse 3, and he goes, and you ask and you don't receive because you ask wrongly to spend on your passions. It's selfish prayer. So this is, God, and I just want to say, God, we've never tricked God. I don't care how convincing any of us are, he knows our heart. 1 Samuel 16:7, the Lord doesn't look on the outer, he looks at the heart. And so we go, God, I just, our city group's really full or whatever. We have a lot of people over. Would you just give us a bigger house? That'd be such a gift. We want to host more people. And it's really well, actually, you just want a more impressive house, Oh, but our family's grown. We want Thanksgiving. No. You just want a more impressive. Oh, God, would you give me that promotion, that pay raise? I want to get to that next tier. I want to be more generous. When really it's you just want to be more comfortable financially. Oh, God, would you give me a spouse? I've been waiting. I want someone who loves you so we can worship you together. It's you actually just don't want to be lonely anymore. And it's we just can't trick God. He knows what's beneath our prayers. And all those things he's going, what are you asking for? What's the motive underneath that? And we can ask wrongly. And it's if you look at your prayers and you're going, are a lot of those prayers literally just asking God to fuel your hedonism? On all those different levels, are you just asking him to make your life easier or happier or whatever, rather than just going, God, honestly, I don't care what you give me, what you do. I just want more of you. Whatever that means, whatever you take, whatever you give, I just want more of you. That we would be asking the Spirit to convince us of how good he is. So there's coveting, there's prayer, prayerlessness, and the last one is worldliness. So look at verses 4 and 5. He continues, he doesn't let up on this. He says, you adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you suppose it is to no purpose that the scripture says he yearns jealously over the Spirit that he has made to dwell in us? Now, friend is a really loose term, right? According to social media, we've got thousands of friends. But in their culture, 2,000 years ago, before Instagram and Facebook, friend was a really intimate term. And I love that people called Jesus a friend of sinners. And they said it in a derogatory way, you're friends with people that aren't great, whatever. But so I just want to be really clear when he's talking about friendship with the world, what he's not saying is that we should avoid people who don't know Jesus. So if you're a Christian that wants to just hang out with Christians, that's problematic to the gospel and the Great Commission. We should be close to people who are far from God. So what does it mean then, where he's prohibiting us from being a friend of the world? Well, verse 4, the beginning, gives us a hint towards this. He starts by addressing us as adulterous people. You adulterous people. Okay, James, let us have it, right? It's okay. It's giving the idea that we've been talking about of the idea is that we're cheating on God. We're going somewhere else to get what only God can give us. So Hosea and Gomer is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Hosea's a prophet. He's a righteous man. And God tells him, I want you to marry Gomer. Gomer's a prostitute. He goes, all right, man, I guess I'm going to do that. So he goes and marries her, loves her, provides for her, it's going great. And then she leaves him, ends up being sold as a prostitute. And Hosea goes to God, goes, what do you want me to do? And God says in chapter 3, Hosea 3, verse 1, he says, go again. Go again, Hosea. Love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as, this is key, the Lord loves the children of Israel, although they turn to other gods and love cakes of raisin. So Hosea and Gomer is a picture of us. We're Gomer, leaving the faithful love of God and trying to look somewhere else for what we can only find in him, to try to be friends with the world, to get what we can out of that. But then you look at verse 5, and he says he yearns jealously over the spirit that he has made in us. God is jealous for you. Like just for a second, pause and think about this. God wasn't created. Like he has no beginning and he has no end. He spoke the sun into existence and it sparked. He formed the 8 billion people alive today personally. He sculpted Everest. He expanded the Atlantic. He made the galaxies that we will never know about. He's near to people here in Lincoln and in people in Shanghai and Islamabad and Bangkok and London and Tijuana. And he's sustaining the world right now. And listen, he's jealous for you. He's jealous for you. His divine heart races when he sees you become a friend of the world, abandoning him to look for something you'll never find. Isn't that bizarre? Like all the things God is managing right now, all the things he's responsible for, all the people he's listening to, and his care is so personal that he's jealous for you, for me, meaning he wants what's best for us. I was typing last night on Google Docs, and it kept trying to change jealous for us to jealous of us, because that's the way we think of jealousy in a worldly sense. Like jealousy is fueled by our hedonistic desire to want something that we don't have that someone else has. No, God's desire isn't jealous. He's not jealous of us. He's jealous for us, meaning he wants what's best for us, and we don't have it. And he's wanting to fight and do whatever he can for us to get that. And so when we give into our hedonistic desires at war within us, he's watching going, don't do it. You're mine. I bought you. I paid for you. You won't find what you're looking for out there. It's a dead end. It's an empty promise. To think that the God of the universe cares that personally about you, it just sits me back and just goes, that's unfathomable. And yet we squander his jealousy. And like Gomer, we sneak out time and time again and try to find love and meaning and fulfillment in places we'll never find it. And yet, like Hosea, no matter how many times we find ourselves enslaved again, broken, empty-handed from our futile hedonistic endeavors, he buys us back and he brings us home. This is the hedonistic war within us. We covet, we're prayerless, we're friends with the world. And Kent Hughes, he's a commentator, pastor, he wrote this. I thought it was so good encapsulating what we just talked about. He says, as a person is victimized by conflicting desires, this war that James is talking about, his or her inner life has become a battleground. There's a war that's going on. He says the old nature, with its self-seeking focus on personal pleasure, aka hedonism, battles against the new nature, Christian hedonism, and selfish pleasure often dominates. This, in turn, fosters a self-focus which naturally diminishes the importance of others and enthrones one's pleasures as the goal of life. And this brings relational war with those around us, especially others in the church. And such narcissistic embrace of one's own pleasure as the chief end of life, hedonism, whether it be sensual, materialistic, professional, or positional, is the bane of the church. So, at this point in James, if you've been with us for a while, can we all collectively admit that it's heavy? Like, this is not 10 weeks in Romans 8, getting sledgehammer with the gospel every week. You know, like, this is every week I'm leaving like, wow, that's heavy, that's hard. And we're just beaten down, you know, vastly aware of how messed up we are. In chapter 1, I realized that I rarely trust God in trials. Tom had preached on that. I'm the one who hears the word and often does nothing about it, right? In chapter 2, I realized I'm incredibly guilty of partiality, showing preference based on my perception and what they can offer me. I realize my faith often looks dead, ready to bless people with meaningless words, and reluctant to actually show up and help. In chapter 3, I realized my tongue is on fire. I'm sarcastic and loose with my words, and I've hurt people with what I've said. I realize I'm often a fool. Accumulating knowledge, reading books, listening to podcasts, but refusing to be meek like Jesus. And I just realized in chapter 4 that I'm often a hedonist. um, feasting on the buffet of the world, like stuffing my face with everything this world has to offer, and yet starving and simultaneously neglecting to believe that the only source of joy is actually God. I've been a friend of the world. And so if James is about the fruit of faith, I feel like my fruit of faith is that like half-price fruit that's kind of bruised up in the grocery store, you know, that they're like, you can take it if you want, it's free. Like that's what I feel like my faith is. And so if James hasn't helped you realize your shortcomings, if the book of James and the study hasn't helped point out how broken you are, you've missed it. You've completely missed it. If you're walking away from each sermon after Sunday, heading to Village Inn or wherever, and you're like, yeah, man, I'm killing it, you're blind. You're blind. There's no way. But for those of you that honestly just feel heavy from the 54 imperatives in this book, all the things we're supposed to do that we're not really doing a great job of, I need you, and if you're wondering how God feels about you, I need you to read James 4, verse 6, like over and over and over again. One of my favorite verses in the Bible, James 4, verse 6, first 5 words, but he gives more grace. But he gives more grace. His grace deals, listen, friends, with every single part of you. There isn't a place that his grace doesn't invade. Past mistakes, present failings, future catastrophes, his grace is sufficient for it all. And so if you've been saved by Jesus, if you've personally decided that you trust that Jesus did for you what you could never do for yourself, there is no statement you could make. There is no question you could ask. There is no thing you could do that he wouldn't be able to respond, but he gives more grace. And I know when I say something like that, internally, all of us go, no, I don't think that's true. There's no way it could be true. And we start filling in the sentence of what if I, right? But what if I, or even we could do this like horizontally, what if they did this, or what if they, but he gives more grace. So what if I haven't read my Bible in months? He gives more grace. What if I've been ignoring God? He gives more grace. What if I did that thing I promised I never would? He gives more grace. What if I just stop coming to church? He gives more grace. What if I'm addicted to porn? He gives more grace. What if I commit adultery? He gives more grace. What if I got drunk last night? He gives more grace. What if I get drunk tonight? He gives more grace. What if I've had an abortion? He gives more grace. What if I have an abortion? He gives more grace. What if I never kick this sin? He gives more grace. What if I've got secrets and sins in my life that I've never told anyone? He gives more grace. Robert Farrar Capon is an Episcopalian priest. He's passed away now, but he was a gospel beast, and he wrote a book called Between Noon and Three that follows the idea of an affair, and it's a way to picture the gospel. And this is what he says. I don't want to read this over you. He says, trust him, trust Jesus. And when you've done that, you're living the life of grace. No matter what happens to you in the course of that trusting, no matter how many waverings you may have, no matter how much heaviness and sadness your lapses, vices, indispositions, and bratty whining may cause you, you believe that someone else, by his death and resurrection, has made it all right. And you just say thank you and shut up. If he refused to condemn you because your works were rotten, he certainly isn't going to flunk you because your faith isn't so hot. You can fail utterly, therefore, and still live the life of grace. You can fold up spiritually, morally, and intellectually and still be safe, because at the very worst, all you can be is dead. And for him who is the resurrection and the life, that just makes you his cup of tea. There is more grace. There is more grace. He gives more. You can never run it dry. And remember verse 5, God's jealous for you. And that jealousy is an expression of his grace. Listen, if we were him, we might be kind of gracious and be like, I'll give him 3 strikes, but then they're out. But there's just an infinite waterfall of grace that washes over our lives. His jealousy is patient, resilient. His love is infinite and inexhaustible. But the response to his grace, I just want to say this, isn't to abuse it. Right? Like, so I need, the primary thing I need you to hear is he gives more grace, right? So just internalize that for a second, because it feels like that's the hardest thing to actually believe and remember. The secondary thing I want to tell you is that there is a right response to the more grace. And it's not to just use it like an endless credit card where you just can keep swiping and swiping. Like, it's not like, oh, that's pretty cool. All right, I'm going to go do this and that, and I'll come back. You got more grace? You sure? Because I'm going to go party pretty hard. Okay. We don't do that. It's not the way. I had heard a story years ago, and I think this is a true story, but there was a man from the north that had come down when when slavery was at a peak, and he bought a young girl, and they're walking out, and she looks up to him and goes, or he looks to her and he says, "You're free," and she's like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "You're free," and she goes, "Well, am I free to go wherever I want?" And he goes, "Yeah, you're free to go wherever I want." And she says, "Am I free to do whatever I want?" "Yeah, you can do whatever you want." "Well, am I free to be whoever?" "Yeah, you're free to be whoever I want." "Are you sure? I can go anywhere." "Yeah, you can go anywhere." And she says, "Well, then I want to stay with you." And it was this beautiful reality of like, the Father looks to us and goes, you can't sin enough for me not to love you. And you can't spend all my grace. There's no way. And we go, "I don't want to spend any of it then." You could go anywhere. You could find yourself in a bar tonight or a bedroom tonight or whatever. I want to be with you. I mean, that kind of love is just unlike anything else. And so there's a right way to respond to this abundant grace. And so our practical friend James obviously doesn't just leave us with, but he gives more grace. He's like, okay, let me get gritty about this. Let me give you some practical things. So he gives 4 practical ways to respond to the jealous grace of God. Number 1, real quick, is in verse 7. He says, at the beginning of verse 7, he says, "Submit yourselves therefore to God." Submit yourselves therefore to God. So first thing is, he says, get back to God. Get back to God. Submit simply means to give up, to give up, to admit you lost, to tap out. It's what the prodigal son did in Luke 15 when he realized how broken he was. He threw the towel in. And so friends, I'm talking to Christians too, give up the idea that this world has anything to offer. You just got to submit to that reality, that everything you're looking for is actually in him, not out there. Give up searching for another way to God or for happiness. Give up on the act. Come back to your faithful friend. He's on the porch. He's watching. He's waiting. And listen, he doesn't shame us when we come back. For some of us, we're still here, yeah, whatever, but we've been 1 foot here, 1 foot here, and it's going, I want to come back. And I want you to know he doesn't shame us when we come back, when we submit. He throws a huge party like none other. It's the rager of the year, and he's celebrating with all his friends. So get back to God. He's waiting for you, and he's pursuing you. Submit to him and give up. The second thing, verse 7 continues, and he says, resist the devil, and he'll flee from you. Draw near to God, and he'll draw near to you. So not just get back to God, but get near to God. So this verse is mind-blowing. So to just unpack this really quick, it's an invitation and it's a promise. But in the Old Covenant, if you remember, when Moses is interacting with God in the burning bush, God says, don't come any closer. Basically, keep your distance. You can't come too close. Can't come too close to me. And then yet, and that's under the Old Covenant. And then with the New Covenant, what Jesus, his blood had bought and his resurrection had brought, God says, draw near to me and I'll draw near to you. Come as close as you can. Hop in my lap. Like that's it. It's amazing, right? How he has changed that and transitioned it. I also love what it reveals about the heart of God. He doesn't say, draw near to me and I'll make you a better person. Or draw near to me and I'll give you the things you really, really want. He says, draw near to me and I'll draw near to you. That's the heart of God, that he wants an intimate relationship with each one of us. So what's it look like to draw near to God? My best bet is just getting rid of everything that's keeping us away from him, that's distancing us from him. My friend Aldi last week got baptized. Dude threw away 3 trash bags full of new age and demonic stuff that he had, crystals, books, all this stuff. It's like that wild. I don't want anything to do. I've had friends break up with their significant others going, this is just not healthy for my soul. I've had people give their laptops and TVs away because like, I don't want to look at porn anymore. I mean, just whatever. I've had people quit jobs, move cities because they're like, I just want to do whatever I can to get near to God. I don't want to have anything in my way. So get back to God, get near to God. And then the third one, look at the end of verse 8. He says, cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Okay, James, you didn't really leave us with verse 6 very long. You kind of just jumped right into that. All right. But the third one, not just, get back to God, get near to God, but get wrecked by your sin. Like just get exposed and wrecked by your sin. Look at the language. Be wretched, mourn, weep. Mourning and gloom, aka take your sin seriously. Like, it's not a joke. Like, he actually had to give his life for the sins that we're okay with, we're flippant about. He shed his blood. I don't know how many of you have seen The Passion of the Christ. I haven't seen it in probably like 6 or 7 years, to be honest. But it messes with you. Like, it's hard to watch the crucifixion. You want to look away. You're crying. I felt sick to my stomach to actually internalize this depiction of Jesus actually dying for me. And it's like, yeah, we're New Testament Christians. Jesus isn't on the cross anymore. He's resurrected. He's on the throne. But we need to remember the reason he's on the throne is because he was on the cross. And the reason we get an invitation to his kingdom is because he was forsaken for all of our sin. And he took that punishment on. And so it's like this sin that we're just kind of okay with and not really too crazy about. James going, you need to get wrecked by it. You need to take a serious, solemn look at your sin and then rejoice at looking at the cross knowing that your sin stayed there. But don't just move too quick to that. Remember, feel the weight of that and go, God, you're amazing. Thank you. And so don't try to downplay your sin. Don't be afraid of admitting how broken you are. It just makes his cross even that much more big and glorious. And the last one is in verse 10. He says, humble yourselves before God, before the Lord, and he'll exalt you. So if you noticed in verse 6, our favorite words, right? But he gives more grace. He responds saying, therefore, it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So these two things are interconnected. And so the last one is to get low before God, to get low before him. This more grace that we can have is reserved for the humble. You've got to know you need it to get it. So, but our pride in juxtaposition wants God to deal with us according to our merit. Pride says, I want you to give me what I deserve. Humility goes, I don't want you to give me what I deserve because I deserve hell for my sin. Humility goes, I don't deserve anything. And so I want to be clear, humility doesn't grant us grace, okay? If humility were the means to get grace and salvation, that means there would be a work on us in order to get salvation. It wouldn't be Jesus plus nothing equals everything anymore. So humility doesn't grant us grace, but it allows us to receive grace as we open up our hands and go, I'm begging right now. I don't have anything to offer. My hands are open. If Gracie this year gives me her Christmas list, and on the back of her list is this little sticky note. And I grab it, I look at it, and she says, hey, Daddy, I want you to know I nailed my dance recital this year. And I learned how to write the alphabet out. I can do it. And I learned how to read some words. And I memorized 3 verses. And she felt like she had to attach that to her Christmas list. I would be heartbroken. Like, sweetheart, why would you ever think that those things would make me want to be more generous toward you? Why would you ever think that, like, I would get you a better gift because you've done those good things? And I think so many of our prayers, we're like asking for stuff, and then we're going, hey, God, I just want you to remember that I have been trying really hard, and I have been doing better. And he's going, don't attach that little sticky note to your prayer request. Get humble. It's the tax collector in Luke 18 that just bangs his chest and goes, be merciful to me, a sinner. I don't have anything to offer you. I don't have anything on my sticky note. I just have a good God that's a good father that loves me because God was good and I'm bad. Like, that's it. And so we want to come low. Spurgeon, to all this, Charles Spurgeon said this. He said, in the life of a believer, sin seeks to enter, but grace shuts the door. Sin tries to get the mastery, but grace, which is stronger than sin, resists and will not permit. Sin gets us down at times, puts its foot on our neck, but grace comes to the rescue. Sin comes up like Noah's flood, but grace rides over the top of the mountains like the ark. The reality is, we've got a war within us, right? There's a battle between the hedonism, the world will make us happy. It's my biggest goal in life, and then knowing, oh, actually, the desire is not bad, but the expression of it is, and my joy is in God. That's where it comes from. There's a battle that we're going to fight for the rest of our lives. It's going to flesh out internally in our own wrestle. It's going to flesh out to each other, and that's where we're going to be frustrated and compare and be jealous and envy and hurt and slander and whatever. But I need you to know, our hope as Christians isn't that we're going to somehow win that battle. Like, I'm not trying to compel you to say, hey, here's the point of my sermon. You can win the war with your hedonism. Just do this. That's good advice, and I want you to do that. But the good news is that there was a war that you couldn't win for sure. And it was between Jesus, our triumphant lamb, our humble lamb, and sin and Satan and death. And he didn't wield a sword. He didn't grab a gun. He gave up his life and he died on a cross. And that war where he took on what we should have taken on for our sin, he takes it all on so that us as rebels, as messy, broken Christians, they go, I'm not killing it with the book of James. I'm not doing well with this battle. God would go, that's okay. That's not where your hope should lie. Your hope is that I've won the battle for you. And that 2,000 years ago, I concreted your salvation in, and there's nothing you could do to change it. That would be our hope. As we fight the internal battle, no doubt, we would remember always Jesus won the battle already for our salvation, and we're secure in his hands. Let's pray.